Hey there, Bible nerds. Welcome back to Chapters and Chuckles by Kay, where we dive into the Bible chapter by chapter. So today we're diving into Matthew 26 through 28, and this is it. The final stretch, the last episode for the book of Matthew. So no more parables, no more crowd moments, no more build up. Well, we are just straight up into betrayal, heartbreak, sacrifice, and then the kind of victory nobody saw coming. So this is where Jesus goes from being followed to being abandoned, from being praised to being crucified. And somehow in the middle of all the chaos, God's plan is still moving perfectly on schedule. So not rushed, not delayed, just unfolding. So go ahead and grab your drink, get cozy, and let's dive in. Have water today. I have this cute cup today given to me by my friend. Anyways, I just have water. Okay, so Matthew 26. So this chapter feels like everything starts collapsing at once. So Jesus knows it. The disciples definitely don't. So it opens with Jesus straight up telling his disciples, like, hey, in 2 days I'm about to be handed over and crucified. So no soft delivery, no sugar coating. Meanwhile, the religious leaders are off in a corner plotting like villains in a low budget drama, right? So trying to arrest him quietly so they don't start a riot. They're calculating timing. Jesus is already surrendered to it. Then we shift scenes to Bethany. Jesus is at a dinner, and a woman comes in with this expensive jar of perfume and pours it over him. Not a little dab, like literally, like the jar is probably like this big, and then she uses all of it. So the disciples lose their minds over it. They're like, that could have been sold and given to the poor. Sounds noble, right? But Jesus cuts through the fake practicality. He defends her, saying she's preparing him for burial. So she gets it. She understands something others don't. While everyone else is still thinking kingdom equals power, she's already in mourning mode, pretty much. So right after that, Judas decides it's time to cash out. He goes to the chief priest and asks what they'll give him to hand Jesus over. So 30 pieces of silver. That's the price. The same Jesus who just had perfume worth a fortune poured on him gets sold for the cost of a slave. Human loyalty is not impressive. Then comes the Last Supper. Jesus sits down with his disciples for Passover, and this is where things get heavy. He tells them, one of them will betray him. Everyone starts panicking, asking, like, surely not me, which is kind of wild because apparently none of them trust themselves that much. Judas even asks, or no, he acts innocent, and Jesus basically says, so let me go back. Judas asks him and also acting innocent at the same time. So Jesus says, you said it, not me. So awkward. Doesn't even begin to like cover the table, right? So then Jesus does something that changes everything. He takes the bread, breaks it, and says, this is my body. Then the cup. This is my blood of the covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. He's not just predicting his death, he's giving it meaning. This isn't just execution. This is sacrifice. This is rescue. And just when you think, the disciples might finally grasp something, Jesus tells them they're all about to fall away. Peter, loud and confident as always, is like, not me, I'd die for you. And Jesus looks at him and says, before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter doubles down, like the others back him. And spoiler, they all scatter anyways. Then we get to Gethsemane. This is where it gets painfully real. Jesus isn't calm and glowing like a painting. He is distressed, overwhelmed. He tells his closest guys, like, stay here and keep watch with me. And then he goes off to pray. And what does he pray? If it's possible, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, yours be done. So that right there is the rawest picture of obedience you're going to get. He doesn't want the suffering, but he chooses it anyway. Meanwhile, the disciples, they fall asleep repeatedly. Jesus comes back, finds them out cold, and you can almost feel the disappointment. Not anger, just sadness. Like, couldn't you keep watch with me for 1 hour? He's about to carry the weight of the world, and they cannot stay awake. So Judas, then Judas shows up, and this part is just cold. He greets Jesus with a kiss on the cheek, like everything is normal, and that's the signal for the crowd to arrest him. So betrayal disguised as affection. Jesus doesn't resist. Um, One of the disciples tries to fight back, cuts off a servant's ear, and Jesus immediately shuts it down and heals the guy. Even in arrest, he's still restoring people. Meanwhile, everyone else runs, just like he said they would. From there, Jesus is dragged before the religious leaders. False witnesses come in, twisting his words, trying to build a case. Nothing sticks until the high priest demands, Tell us if you are the Messiah. And Jesus finally answers plainly. He doesn't dodge it, he confirms it. That's all they need. They accuse him of blasphemy, start mocking him, spitting on him, hitting him. The same people who are supposed to recognize him are now abusing him. All while and while like all while all that is happening inside, Peter is outside unraveling. So a servant girl recognizes him. Oh, you were with Jesus, and then he denies it. Then again, with curses. And right after the third denial, the rooster crows, and then it hits him. Everything Jesus said. Peter doesn't defend himself anymore. He just breaks. He goes outside and weeps bitterly. Not a not a quiet tear. This is full on like collapse. So, that's Matthew 26. No clean resolution, no victory moment yet. Just betrayal, fear, exhaustion, failure, and Jesus standing in the middle of it all. Fully aware, fully in control, and still choosing the cross. So if you're, paying attention, the real tension isn't where Jesus will go through with it. He already decided that. The tension is watching everyone else fall apart around him while he stays steady. And honestly, it's uncomfortable because you can see yourself in almost every character here, like loyal until it gets hard, asleep when it matters, brave until fear shows up. And Jesus still moves towards sacrifice anyway. Humanity fumbles. Jesus does not. That's the whole, pretty much chapter in one sentence. All right, fun fact corner. I have it on my phone because I had forgotten to put it in my notes. So the 30 pieces of silver Judas got for betraying Jesus wasn't random pocket change. It lines up with the piece or the price of a slave. So the price of a slave in the Old Testament is 30 pieces of silver. So yeah, Jesus was literally valued at the lowest tier of human worth in that culture, which is kind of the point. The one who had infinite worth chose to be treated as if he had none. So humanity really said, oh, best we can do is, clearance rack pricing and pretty much just ran with it. So yeah, that's our fun fact for this chapter. All right, chapter 27. So morning hits and the religious leaders waste zero time. They've already decided Jesus needs to die. Now they just need it to look official. So they hand him over to Pontius Pilate because Rome is, the only one who can actually authorize execution. Meanwhile, Judas finally has his moment of clarity and it's ugly. He sees that Jesus is condemned and suddenly that 30 pieces of silver doesn't feel like a win anymore because it's literally nothing. Like So regret hits hard. He goes back to the chief priests, basically saying, I messed up, I betrayed innocent blood. And what do they say? That's your problem. So, yeah. So not Jesus, Judas throws the money into the temple and leaves, and then he ends his life. It's heavy because it shows the difference between regret and repentance. He felt bad, but he didn't run to God. He ran away from everything. So back to Jesus. So Pilate starts questioning him. Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answers, but beyond that, he stays mostly silent while accusations are flying at him, which drives Pilate a little crazy because most people beg for their life at this point. Jesus just doesn't. He's not fighting the process because he already accepted the outcome, and the outcome is needed, right? So that specific outcome is needed. So now Pilate has this custom during the festival where he releases a prisoner. So crowd gets to choose. He thinks he's being clever, so he puts Jesus up against a known criminal, Barabbas. So violent, guilty, no debate. Pilate probably expecting the crowd to pick Jesus easily, right? But the religious leaders work the crowd like a PR campaign, and suddenly, everyone's chanting for Barabbas, not just release him, but also crucify Jesus. The same city that welcomed him days earlier is now calling for his death. People are consistent only in being inconsistent. Even now, honestly. So Pilate even tries to step back from it. He literally washes his hands in front of them, like, okay, this is on you. So symbolic, sure, effective, not really, because he still gives the order, trying to avoid guilt while still participating in the decision. It is a weird moral gymnastics routine humans love to perform. Then the soldiers take over, and this part is just brutal. They strip Jesus, dress him like a fake royal in a fake royal robe, jam a crown of thorns onto his head and mock him like, Hail, King of the Jews. They spit on him, hit him, and treat him like entertainment. The irony is almost unbearable. They're mocking him as king while literally standing in front of the actual king. Then they lead him out to be crucified. He's so physically drained that they grab a random guy who is Simon of Cyrene to carry the cross for him. Even in that moment, you see how human Jesus fully is. This isn't symbolic suffering. This is real body breaking exhaustion. So they arrive in Golgotha, the place of the skull. They offer him wine mixed with gall, basically a pain, something that makes the pain dull, and he refuses it. Um, he's not numbing this; he's going through it fully aware. So they nail him on the cross, divide his clothes by casting lots, and sit there watching him die like it's a show. Because to them it is a show. Above his head, they put the charge, Jesus is king, the king of the Jews. Again, meant as a mockery, but accidentally telling the truth. So he's crucified between two criminals, um, one on each side. So even people passing by are mocking him, shaking their heads, throwing insults like, oh, if you're the son of God, come down from the cross. The religious leaders join in too, basically saying like, oh, he saved others, but he can't save himself. Which is ironic because the only reason he doesn't save himself is so he can save everyone. But, sure, go off. So from noon to 3 in the afternoon, darkness covers the land. So middle of the day and evening goes dark. Creation itself is reacting. Then Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? So that line hits deep. It's not doubt, it's the weight of separation, of carrying sin, of experiencing what humanity deserves. Some people misunderstand and think he's calling Elijah. Others just, keep watching. Then he cries out loud and gives up his spirit, not taken from him, given. And right when he dies, everything shifts. The temple curtain tears in two from top to bottom. That thick barrier separating the people from God's presence is gone, not gently opened, like torn. Access just got rewritten in one moment. And it doesn't stop there. The earth shakes, rocks split, tombs break open, dead people are raised and later appear in the city, which is wild and also slightly terrifying, like zombies. uh, the centurion, but they weren't raised as zombies. Like it's like they came back to life pretty much. They didn't look like zombies. Anyway, so the centurion and the soldiers watching all this are like, okay, yeah, this really was the Son of God. So, it took an earthquake and supernatural chaos, pretty much zombies, for them some of them to see that. But they got there, some of them. So there are also women watching from a distance, the ones who actually stayed. Mary Magdalene, another Mary, and the others who followed Jesus faithfully. Um, while most of the disciples disappeared, they're still there. Quiet loyalty, no spotlight. And as evening comes, a rich man named Joseph of Arimathea steps in. He is a disciple, but low-key about it, okay? He's a discreet disciple. He's a discreet follower of Jesus. Let's put it that way. So he asked Pilate for Jesus' body, wraps it in clean linen, and places it in his own new tomb. Rolls a stone in front, and then leaves. So it's respectful, intentional, and honestly probably risky for him reputation wise, but considering he's been, following Jesus only quietly until now. But he shows up when it counts. And because their religious leaders are still paranoid, they go back to Pilate and say, hey, this guy said he'd rise in 3 days, so we should secure the tomb so no one steals the body and fakes it. So Pilate lets them seal the tomb and post guards. They're trying to stop a resurrection from happening like it's some kind of a prank someone might pull. Which is almost funny because they're acting like human effort could block what God already decided. So now Jesus is dead, buried, and guarded. Everything looks final. Everything feels finished. Except it's not. All right, fun fact corner. So the temple curtain that tore when Jesus died, yeah, so that wasn't some flimsy decorative drape. It was massive, right? Like we're talking about 60 feet tall and several inches thick, designed specifically to separate people from the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space where God's presence dwelled. And it tore from top to bottom, not bottom to top like, humans would do. Because, they can't reach from the top. So meaning nobody down there grabbed it and started ripping. This was a very intentional, like, oh, God just changed the access rules moment. No more barriers, no more inclusive entry. No, exclusive entry. So direct access was unlocked. All right, Matthew 28. So after the Sabbath at dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary go to the tomb, not with celebration energy. They're grieving, processing, probably still trying to make sense of how everything fell apart so fast. And then the ground starts shaking. There's a violent earthquake, and an angel of the Lord comes down, rolls the stone away, and just casually sits on it like this is light work. Imagine, so if the angel can just sit there, the angel's probably big. Anyways, so his appearance is blazing, clothes white as snow, and then the guards, fully trained Roman soldiers, yeah, they're shaking in fear and basically collapse. The angel looks at the women and says, "Do not be afraid." Which is always funny because clearly something terrifying just happened. And based on how angels are actually described from the Bible, they look scary. They don't look like how typical angels are, usually how you would see it in movies. Like they're, these beautiful, beautiful human-like appearance, but with wings and all that stuff. That's not how they're explained in the Bible. They kind of look terrifying. Like if, anyways, so, anyways, so he just said, "Do not be afraid," even though he probably looked terrifying, and whatever he just did was kind of like terrifying. But he drops the news that flips everything. He said, "He is not here. He has risen, just as he said." And just like that, not stolen, not missing, risen. Then he invites them to look. So the place where Jesus was, now empty. And then he tells them to go quickly. Then the disciples tell the disciples that Jesus is alive and that he's going ahead of them in Galilee. So the women leave, and now they're carrying two emotions at once, fear and joy, which honestly feels about right when God does something that big. So your brain cannot process it fast enough. And then Jesus himself meets them, just appears alive, and they fall at his feet and worship him, because what else do you even do in that moment? And he tells them the big thing: "Don't be afraid. Go tell my brothers, go to Galilee. There they will see me." So notice that, my brothers. These are the same guys who ran away, denied him, disappeared when things got hard, and Jesus' first move isn't calling them out, it's restoring them. That's not human behavior. That's grace moving at full speed. Meanwhile, the guards who witnessed all of this go back and report to the chief priest. And instead of, I don't know, reconsidering everything, they double down. They literally pay the soldiers to spread a lie. These so-called priests tell the soldiers, pay the soldiers to spread a lie that the disciples stole the body while they were asleep, which is already a weak story, because if you're asleep, how do you know who took the body, right? Like, but sure, let's go with that. It's damage control. They're trying to contain a resurrection like it's a PR crisis. Then we get to Galilee. The disciples go to the mountain Jesus told them about. They see him, they worship him, and still some of them doubt, even though they clearly see him, it's him. Which is wild, but also painfully relatable, because again, they cannot process what just happened. Anyway, so he's standing right there alive, and some part of them is like, I don't know. Humans really need time to catch up with reality sometimes. Or most times, honestly. And then Jesus gives what we now call the Great Commission. He says all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him, not partial authority, all of it. Then he tells them to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything he commanded. Basically, what you've seen, what you've learned, what you lived through with me, take that everywhere. And then he ends with this, like, surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Not, oh, good luck. Not you're on your own now. He says with you always, even when you mess up, even when you doubt, even when you're still trying to process what just happened, he doesn't leave. And that's how Matthew ends. No dramatic fade out, just a risen Savior handing off the mission and promising his presence with us always, right? Okay, fun fact corner. Wow. So women were the first witnesses of the resurrection. This is my favorite fun fact ever. Which in that culture was not how you'd write a convincing story if you were making it up. Women's testimonies weren't even considered legally strong at the time. So if this were, fabricated, they would have picked more credible witnesses by cultural standards. But they didn't, because they were just telling what actually happened, not polishing it for approval. So this whole stretch, Matthew 26 through 28, really exposes people. Loyalty sounds strong until pressure hits. Faith feels solid until fear walks in. The disciples said all the right things and still folded, which is very human, honestly. Judas regretted but didn't return. because he ended his life. Peter broke down, but eventually came back. The women stayed when others left, and through all of that, Jesus stayed consistent. He knew betrayal was coming, and still loved. He knew suffering was ahead and still surrendered. He knew people would fail him and still called them brothers after. The real takeaway isn't, like be better so you don't mess up, because we will always mess up. We're humans. We're designed that way, I guess. So, because clearly, yeah. So the takeaway is that Jesus doesn't cancel you at your worst moment. He meets you there and still calls you forward. Also, the resurrection isn't just a nice ending to a sad story. It's the whole point. If Jesus stays in that tomb, everything else falls apart. But because he didn't, now failure isn't final. Failure isn't final. Death isn't the end, and your story doesn't stop at your worst chapter. So that's a wrap on the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. So you made it through the betrayal, parables, miracles, hard teachings, and the ultimate plot twist that literally changed everything. Everything. If this journey showed you anything, is that Jesus isn't just someone to admire from a distance. He's someone who stepped into the mess, carried it, and walked out of the grave with authority over all of it. So, thanks for hanging out, Bible nerds. Go sit this one a little. Go sit with this one a little. It's not light reading, but it's life changing. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna probably take a week or two break before the next season. I'm still trying to figure out, but I'm probably gonna cover the book of Job on the next one, most likely. Either the book of Job or the book of Acts. But yeah, I'm gonna take a week or two break, do my research and do my all that stuff, and then yeah. So thank you for listening to Chapters and Chuckles by Kay. If you have enjoyed this episode, this whole series about the book of Matthew, please follow or subscribe. You can catch new episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Until next time, stay curious and stay blessed.